Nicole Kidman has certainly had her highs and lows. Privately, she's faced the same struggles of many modern women: the pain of divorce, the heartbreak of miscarriage.
For years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban convinced the world their marriage was unbreakable. Then the divorce papers surfaced, exposing a split that had been quietly unfolding behind closed doors long before anyone suspected a thing. But the breakup didn't begin the day the paperwork was filed. It had been unfolding in silence for weeks. What really ended one of Hollywood's most admired marriages? And what has Nicole finally revealed about the breakup? Join us as we uncover the story behind the headlines. The marriage that was built on two colliding careers. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban built their life together inside a structure that almost nobody else in entertainment has ever had to navigate at the same scale for the same length of time. They met at a 2005 G-Day LA event, an Australian celebration in Los Angeles that brought together expatriates from both of their industries, and then married almost immediately in June 2006. Kidman was already one of the most accomplished actresses of her generation, an Academy Award winner for The Hours, with a career that demanded international travel, months-long location shoots, and a schedule that simply does not pause for anyone's personal life. Urban, on the other hand, was in the process of becoming one of the defining voices in modern country music, a career that, by its nature, requires constant touring, which is because the stage is where country artists make their living and their reputation. And stepping away from the road for any extended period carries real professional and financial costs. These two people, each pursuing one of the most demanding careers in American entertainment, decided to build a marriage and a family across the gap between them. And they did. For most of 19 years, it worked out perfectly for them. They had two daughters, Sunday Rose, born in 2008, and Faith Margaret, born via surrogate in 2010. They were visibly affectionate at public events, walked red carpets together for 2 decades, and built the public image of a couple who had genuinely figured out how to make an impossible logistical situation function. While Urban toured, Kidman filmed in locations around the world, and at the end of that, they always found their way back to each other between those obligations, repeatedly, for 19 years. That was what the public saw. What they never fully saw was the accumulating cost of that arrangement, the toll that such absence takes on a marriage over nearly 2 decades. And in 2025, that cost finally came due. The question that mattered was who decided they couldn't keep paying it. The separation that was happening, months before anyone knew. The official story looks simple. Kidman filed for divorce on September 30th, 2025, citing irreconcilable differences, with the date of separation listed as the same day. But the actual documents reveal a much more complicated story about the timing, one that reveals just how long this had been in motion before either of them said anything publicly. The paperwork shows Kidman signed her documents on September 6th, and Urban signed his on August 29th, months earlier than Kidman. The divorce had been formally moving through the legal process for at least a month before the public filing, meaning the decision and the negotiations surrounding it had been happening quietly throughout the late summer of 2025. The couple had been living apart for some time before the legal filing, driven in significant part by the simple geography of their work. Kidman was in London filming Practical Magic 2, and Urban was on the road for his High and Alive World Tour. 2 careers, 2 continents, and the same gap that had always existed between them. Except this time, the gap did not close back up the way it always had before. What makes the timeline genuinely significant is the asymmetry in how the two of them appear to have experienced the same separation. Kidman was hurt and felt betrayed, having been actively trying to save the marriage even as it was unraveling. Urban wanted to end the marriage, while Kidman had hoped they could work through whatever had brought them to this point. Two people arriving at the same legal outcome from very different emotional starting points. So if Kidman was hoping to repair things, what was actually driving Urban toward the exit? And did he ever say it himself? What Keith Urban actually said about his career. In the weeks following the divorce filing, Keith Urban gave an interview to Entertainment Tonight that revealed just how much damage the distance between them had led to and what he has learned to prioritize over the years. He did not discuss the divorce directly. For a man who was recently divorced from a woman he had been with for 19 years, he mostly talked about his career, his touring schedule, and his relationship to his work as a musician. What he said carried weight specifically because of the timing and what it implied about the priorities that had shaped the final years of his marriage. Urban told the outlet that making sacrifices in his relationship is necessary for his career. He said it directly. "It's not a job. It's my life." And then he added the sentence that has been quoted across nearly every piece of coverage analyzing the breakup since, "It's just got to be your purpose." Urban was not expressing regret about the cost his career exacted from his marriage. In simple words, he revealed that the demands of his career are not negotiable, that touring and performing are not simply what he does for a living, but the organizing purpose of his existence, and that whatever sacrifices that purpose requires of the people around him are simply part of the arrangement. Urban had been headlining as the lead performer for the new CBS series The Road during this same period, a show built around up-and-coming country artists competing to become his opening act, meaning that even as his 19-year marriage was formally ending, his professional commitments were continuing at full intensity, with no apparent interruption to his touring or his television obligations. But Keith Urban's career demands were not new. He had been touring throughout the entire marriage. So, what changed? The questionable choices that insiders would not fully explain. Beyond the career sacrifice explanation that Urban offered publicly, multiple sources speaking to entertainment outlets in the immediate aftermath of the filing painted a considerably more complicated picture of what had actually been happening in the final stretch of the marriage. A source described Urban as going through some stuff and as making questionable choices in the period leading up to the separation. The nature of those choices was never publicly detailed, and no outlet has produced verified, on-the-record confirmation of exactly what that phrase referred to. Another source noted that the split had not been a secret within Urban's inner circle for some time before it became public. That detail aligns with the documented timeline, the August and September signature dates on the divorce paperwork, and suggests that the people closest to Urban had been watching the marriage deteriorate for a meaningful period before the rest of the world found out. What makes this period of the story difficult to fully resolve is the gap between what insiders were willing to hint at and what either Kidman or Urban has confirmed directly. Kidman, for her part, has been notably restrained in addressing the divorce in public specifics. She has been keeping it positive and that she believes everything happens for a reason. She tried to save the marriage, and that didn't work out, so she simply let it go. What both the career sacrifice quote and the questionable choices reporting point toward is the same basic conclusion. This was not simply two busy people whose schedules drifted apart over 19 years until the relationship quietly expired from neglect. There was an active decision point, on Urban's side specifically, that pushed the marriage toward its end. Whether that decision point was entirely about the demands of his touring career, as he described publicly, or whether it involved something more specific that his inner circle was aware of and the public was not. While all of this was unfolding in the background, the custody arrangement for their two daughters was being worked out in considerably more concrete and verifiable terms. The custody agreement that reveals what actually mattered most. The custody agreement designated Kidman's home as the primary residence for both Sunday Rose, now 17, and Faith Margaret, 15. According to the documents, Kidman will have the girls 306 days per year. Urban was granted scheduled visitation, including alternating weekends, and both parents retained joint legal responsibility for major decisions about the girls' upbringing. That number, 306 days a year with their mother, is not a small detail. It represents a custody structure heavily weighted toward Kidman as the primary parent, which raises questions about what influenced that arrangement and why both parties, including Urban, ultimately agreed to it rather than fighting for a more balanced split. What the agreement reveals, regardless of the reasons behind its terms, is that both Kidman and Urban prioritized stability and clarity for their daughters over any other consideration in structuring the divorce. The agreement did more than simply carve up weekends between two homes. It established, in formal legal language, a framework intended to ensure that whatever else was unraveling between the two adults, the children would have a defined and dependable structure to rely on in both households. In the months following the formal settlement, Urban had been actively trying to repair his relationship with both his ex-wife and his daughters in Nashville. He became uncomfortable with how little he and Kidman now speak. A source close to Urban offered a window into his emotional state during this period. There's no denying it's a lot to take in, but he's making a conscious effort not to be bitter, because he knows that won't help anyone. While Urban was reportedly working to repair the relationship, Nicole Kidman's public life in the months after the filing told a very different story about where her focus had shifted. What Nicole Kidman's public life revealed. In the weeks and months following the September 2025 filing, Nicole Kidman did something that many people going through a high-profile divorce do not manage to do. She kept working, kept appearing publicly, and gave very little indication that the breakup had derailed the professional momentum she had built. She appeared at Paris Fashion Week with a new hairstyle that fans immediately and somewhat affectionately labeled her breakup bangs, the kind of small, visible signal that often accompanies a major life change, processed in the most public possible forum. She appeared on the cover of Vogue in the same period the divorce news was breaking, continuing the kind of high-profile professional presence that has defined her career for decades. When Kidman was asked directly about the divorce in subsequent interviews, her response was notably composed and deliberately non-specific, consistent with someone who had decided, whatever pain she was privately experiencing, that the details of what had gone wrong were not going to be litigated through the media. She has spoken about not numbing her pain, breaking her silence on the split in terms that acknowledge the difficulty of the experience without assigning blame or rehashing specific grievances publicly. What also emerged in coverage of this period was speculation, sourced anonymously and not confirmed by Kidman herself, that she had begun a relationship with a high-profile entertainment executive. That detail has never been verified by any on-the-record confirmation from Kidman or her representatives, and it falls firmly into the category of unconfirmed reporting rather than established fact. What it has done, accurately or not, is feed into a broader narrative in entertainment coverage about how the two former spouses appeared to be processing the end of their marriage in very different ways. Urban is reportedly working to repair connections in Nashville, and Kidman is reportedly moving forward into new chapters of both her professional and personal life. The contrast between these two pictures, one person described as desperate to repair things, the other described as keeping it positive and believing everything happens for a reason, captures something important about how unevenly a divorce can be experienced, even when both parties ultimately sign the same legal documents. And underneath all the speculation and the dueling sources, There is one piece of this story that requires the most context: the specific financial structure by which this marriage was protected from the very beginning. The prenuptial agreement and what it reveals about the marriage's entire architecture. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban married in 2006 with a prenuptial agreement in place, a detail that became significant once the divorce proceedings began, because the terms of that agreement had reportedly been structured around something specific to Urban's history before the marriage even began: his past struggles with substance use. Urban has spoken publicly, for years, about his recovery from addiction, a recovery that began before he met Kidman, and that he has credited, in part, to the stability the marriage provided him. Reports describing the prenuptial agreement have referenced what has been characterized in some coverage as a clause connected to sobriety, structured in a way that tied certain financial terms to Urban maintaining his recovery throughout the marriage. That level of deliberate planning around a specific vulnerability is itself a form of intimacy and trust. Kidman married Urban with full knowledge of his history and building legal protections around it, rather than treating it as something to be quietly ignored. It also means that, whatever ultimately happened in the marriage's final years, both parties entered the relationship with their eyes open to the specific risks involved and had already agreed on a framework for how those risks would be addressed financially if the worst happened. The settlement that emerged from the divorce, reported in some coverage as totaling significant assets and being shaped in part by the terms of that original prenuptial structure, shows 19 years of two substantial entertainment careers being formally divided according to an agreement, both of them signed before any of the specific events of 2025 had happened. Nicole Kidman is now 58 years old. She has built one of the most respected and enduring careers in modern film, with an Academy Award, multiple Emmy Awards, and a body of work that spans 5 decades. She has been married twice, first to Tom Cruise for 11 years, ending in a divorce that generated its own extensive public speculation, and then to Keith Urban for 19 years, ending now in circumstances that remain genuinely incomplete in the public record. What can be said with confidence, based on verified documents and on-the-record statements, is this: the divorce paperwork shows a separation process that had been quietly underway for weeks before public confirmation. Keith Urban has stated directly that his career requires sacrifices and described it as his purpose, in language given in the immediate context of explaining his own circumstances following the split. Sources close to both parties have offered somewhat conflicting accounts of who wanted to end the marriage and who was trying to save it, with Kidman generally described as the party working to repair things and Urban generally described as the party who initiated the decision to end the marriage. The custody arrangement heavily favors Kidman as the primary parent for their 2 daughters, and both former spouses have, in the months since, been navigating the aftermath in markedly different ways. Urban reportedly working to rebuild communication in Nashville, Kidman maintaining a public profile and a professional momentum that has not visibly slowed. What neither of them has done, as of this telling, is sit down and give the single definitive account that explains, beyond all doubt, exactly what went wrong after 19 years. What exists instead is a careful, partial picture assembled from court documents, anonymous sources, and the specific words each has chosen to say publicly, with Urban's statement about purpose and sacrifice offering the most direct insight into his own thinking. Kidman's composed restraint tells its own story about how she has chosen to handle one of the most painful and public chapters of her adult life. 2 people built a marriage across 2 of the most demanding careers in American entertainment, sustained it for 19 years, raised 2 daughters inside it, and then watched it end in a process that began quietly in the late summer of 2025, and is still, in many ways, being processed by both of them in real time. The documents tell part of the story. The interviews tell another part. The full truth, the private, complete version that only Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban actually know, has not yet been told by either of them and may never be told in full to anyone outside the small circle of people who watched it happen up close. What do you think actually drove this divorce? A career that genuinely could not coexist with a marriage anymore? Or something deeper that neither of them has been willing to say publicly yet? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.